Hello everyone, this is Mr. Myers. Tonight's homework is Lesson 1.3, Political Ideologies Part 2, which is an extension of last night's homework. Make sure you take good notes as always and be ready for the quiz tomorrow. The objectives of this lesson are to focus primarily on specific domestic policy positions of liberals and conservatives. We'll talk a little bit about foreign policy positions. Those tend to be a little bit less clear, and then how these beliefs ultimately are represented by political parties in the United States. Hopefully you remember from last night's lesson the basic idea that liberals generally tend to think that government is good, that government programs and services can help to make a better society, a more equal society in terms of economics, and eliminate the gap, or at least shrink the gap between the rich and the poor, and that the government should not regulate personal private behavior unless it achieves or serves some kind of broader social goal regarding equality. So we mentioned a couple specific policy positions yesterday as examples, but the two big areas in which we see liberals wanting to enact certain policies and to create laws and programs is in regards to ending poverty and to create a more equal society. In terms of ending poverty, liberals would generally tend to support Social Security or expansion of Social Security, welfare programs for the poor and for the unemployed, more money for health care or even universal health care, government subsidized health care, and more government aid for education, raising the minimum wage, and generally tend to support labor unions. In terms of promoting a more equal society, liberals would generally tend to support affirmative action programs, which would take gender or race or other factors into hiring decisions and college admissions decisions. They would tend to support criminal justice reform to make sure that the poor or minorities are not overrepresented in prison. They would tend to support women's rights on the issues of abortion. They would tend to be pro-choice and for increased access to birth control, support gay rights and gay marriage, and allowing illegal immigrants to stay or at least to create some kind of path to citizenship. Liberals would also generally tend to support more environmental regulation, to combat climate change, and to support gun control legislation. Conservatives, on the other hand, believe in small government, that the economy will do better with less government interference and regulation. They believe in the idea of equality of opportunity, the idea that as long as everyone has a relatively equal starting point, that an equal end point is not necessarily something that government should guarantee, and therefore that gaps between rich people and poor people are largely a result of self-reliance and hard work and initiative, and therefore they would tend to reject programs that they would consider social engineering or artificial attempts to try to create a more equal society. In addition, they believe in the importance of religion and morality both in public and private affairs. Conservative policy positions, therefore, would support the idea of free markets, deregulation for businesses, low taxes for both individuals and corporations. Conservatives generally would want to reduce or eliminate welfare programs because they believe that it creates dependency and it will destroy the will or initiative for people to go out and work hard, and generally would be anti-labor union. Conservatives tend to be more skeptical about whether climate change exists, and if it does exist, they're skeptical about what we can really do about it, certainly not without destroying jobs or the economy. They would tend to be tough on crime and support the death penalty. They would support restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion and increased access to birth control. Many conservatives tend to be more devoutly religious than liberals, and so we see more support for things like prayer in schools, traditional families, traditional marriage between a man and a woman, Second Amendment gun protection rights, and they would tend to support deporting illegal immigrants. In terms of foreign policy issues, there's much more internal debate between liberals and between conservatives, so there's less clear policy positions that we can really talk about for this as opposed to domestic policy positions. Generally speaking, liberals would support protective tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods in order to protect labor union jobs in native industries, and they tend to be more dovish, meaning that they would be less likely to support wars and foreign interventions. Conservatives tend to be more about free trade, so they would want low tariffs or no tariffs, and tend to be more hawkish, meaning that they're more likely probably to use military intervention abroad. Now, you've heard me say about 100 times that liberals generally believe, or conservatives generally believe, because we're generalizing here. These are things that we could assume an average liberal or conservative would support. So if your dad is a conservative but he supports a woman's right to an abortion, or your mom is a liberal but she believes in low taxes, that's okay. We're just trying to paint with a broad brush. So, support for these political beliefs or political ideologies translates to support for particular political parties. In America, we're pretty much dominated by a two-party system. Liberals tend to vote for the Democratic Party, and conservatives tend to vote for the Republican Party. There are several third parties that consistently show up on state and federal ballots. The Green Party is an environmental party. They're made up mostly of liberals. The Constitution Party and the Libertarian parties are both parties that believe in very limited government in all aspects of life, both in society and the economy. The difference between the two is that the Constitution Party has a strong Christian identity to it. They want to create a Christian nation. Most people that support these two groups tend to be conservative, but there are some liberals that have a libertarian bent to them as well. This concludes Lesson 1.3, an extension on political ideologies. We discussed liberal and conservative domestic policy positions and a tiny bit on foreign policy positions, and how support for those positions ultimately translates to support to certain political parties in the United States. I hope you took good notes and rock the quiz tomorrow. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon.